An old dog is tied to one leg of a picnic table near the edge of a park. He's barely moving, thin through the hips and gray around the muzzle. Even before anyone gets close, it's obvious how old he is. Beside him is a folded piece of paper, tucked under a rock so it won't blow away. His name is Otis. He's 17 years old. He's been getting confused lately. We can't take care of him anymore. Please help him. The person who finds him kneels a few feet away and says his name. Otis doesn't lift his head. He doesn't look toward the voice. For a moment, the word confused on the note seems to fit. Then someone opens a bag of food. Otis slowly turns his head toward the smell. That one response doesn't explain what's happening to him. But it raises a question. How much of the world around Otis is he still taking in? And there is a bigger one. How does a dog who spent nearly his entire life with people end up tied to a picnic table with a note asking someone else to help him? 17 years is a long time to live with a dog. When things got this hard, what do you think they should have done? To understand how they reached this point, the story has to go back to something much smaller. A leash. For most of his life, Otis knew that leash the second it came off its hook. Orrin rarely had to call him. Usually by the time Orrin reached the door, Otis was already there waiting to go. During his final year, that stopped being so reliable. Orrin would take the same leash down, but sometimes Otis stayed where he was. Other times, he'd lift his head toward the wrong side of the room, as if the sound had come from somewhere else. He might get up eventually. Some mornings, he didn't move at all. At first, Orrin blamed age. Otis was 17. Of course he was slower. But then the changes started showing up in other parts of the day. Some nights, Otis wandered through the house after everyone had gone to bed. Orrin would guide him back, return to sleep, then wake later to hear him moving through the hallway again. There were accidents indoors too, along with moments when Otis stopped at the wrong side of a doorway and simply stood there. During the day, he began sleeping through routines he once noticed immediately. Meals could be prepared without him getting up. Keys could come off the counter without Otis heading toward the door. One morning, Orrin picked up the leash and called him. Otis stayed on the rug. Orrin called again. This time Otis lifted his head but looked toward the opposite end of the hallway. Orrin waited with the leash still in his hand. Then he put it back on the hook. He doesn't want to go anymore. It was a simple explanation. After enough mornings like that, it became easy to believe. Orrin stopped waking Otis for early walks. Then he stopped bringing him on errands. Getting Otis into the car took longer now, and sometimes he would simply stand there, unsure of what came next. The back door changed too. Orrin used to leave it open so Otis could move between the house and yard whenever he wanted. Eventually, he started closing it. Otis hardly seemed to use it anymore. None of those decisions looked important on their own. A missed walk, an errand without the dog, an afternoon with the door closed. But together, they changed the size of Otis's life. And the less he was invited into, the fewer chances Orrin had to see what Otis might still choose for himself. The difficult part was that Otis wasn't the same every day. One afternoon, he followed Orrin from room to room without being called. Another night, he settled at the foot of the bed exactly where he had for years. Then morning came, and Otis might stare at the wrong doorway again or sleep through the sound of the leash. Over time, Orrin stopped waiting as long. By then, leaving Otis out had become part of the routine. Walks, errands, ordinary pieces of the day went on without him. The park was different. This time, no one came back. Over the next day or two, some of the confusion mentioned in the note appears again. Otis wanders at odd hours. He pauses at the wrong side of doorways and sometimes seems unsure where to go next. At other times, he notices a smell or quietly follows someone across the room. At the vet's office, his age, the note, and those observations give the veterinarian reason to suspect canine dementia, clinically known as canine cognitive dysfunction syndrome, or CCDS. It can affect orientation, sleep, learned routines, house training, and the way a dog responds to familiar surroundings. For the first time, the word confused on the note has more context. Some of the behaviors people had been treating as preference could also be signs that navigating the world had simply become harder for him. Every dog deserves to be understood, not just when something goes wrong. The earlier we learn to notice what their behavior can tell us and what they actually need, the better life we can build with them. If you want to understand your dog better, I left a resource in the description that may help. But a diagnosis doesn't give Otis his old routines back. He's still 17. He's still confused. And nobody can simply fix that and bring the younger Otis back. So the question changes. If getting better isn't the goal, what does helping him actually look like now? Dottie Rusk doesn't know what Otis was like before the confusion started. She knows his age, where he was found, and that the veterinarian suspects dementia. Bringing him home gives Otis somewhere safe to go. It doesn't solve much else. The first few nights are hard. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, Otis gets up and walks slow loops through the living room. Sometimes he stops at the wrong side of a doorway until someone gently helps him turn around. One morning, there's an accident near his bed. The next afternoon, he sleeps for hours, then wakes and still can't seem to settle. Dottie is tired. So is Lyle, her husband. One morning, Lyle sits on the kitchen floor with a mug of coffee going cold beside him. Otis is standing in the hallway, facing a section of wall instead of the open doorway a few feet away. What if we didn't make things better for him? Lyle asks. What if all we did was move him to another house? Dottie doesn't have an answer. Otis is safe now, but safety turns out to be more complicated than getting him off that picnic table. He can fall asleep in one room and wake up in the same place, still unsure of where he is. By the 4th or 5th night, Dottie and Lyle have fallen into something close to a routine. Dottie starts noticing that the more they rush toward Otis, calling repeatedly, trying to guide him immediately, the harder it can be for him to settle. So, one night, she tries something different. Instead of following him around the room, she sits on the floor several feet away and waits. Otis keeps pacing. After a while, the loops get shorter. Eventually, he lies down nearby. Dottie doesn't know exactly what made the difference, and she doesn't pretend to. She only knows that Otis gave them more information when they stopped trying to make every confusing moment end as quickly as possible. Once she starts watching more closely, other things become easier to notice. Otis may ignore the leash one morning, then spend several minutes following a smell through the yard that afternoon. Maybe there is still more of the world he can enjoy if someone gives him the chance to reach it in his own way. Dottie and Lyle start small. They take him to a quiet park. Otis walks only a little way from the car, then spends longer smelling one patch of grass than he does actually walking. After that, he lies down near them. A few days later, another quiet outing goes reasonably well. Those outings give Dottie confidence. Maybe Otis can handle more than anyone has been asking of him. That Saturday, she brings him to a neighborhood gathering. There's music, people moving around, children passing nearby, chairs scraping, and voices coming from every direction. Otis can't settle. His ears stay low. His breathing gets faster. Even when Dottie guides him toward a quieter corner, he starts moving again. Lyle watches for another minute. I think we should take him home. Dottie hesitates. Then she looks at Otis again. They leave. On the drive home, Otis finally lies down in the back seat. Dottie had been so determined not to let his world become too small that without meaning to, she'd started expecting too much. Otis didn't need the biggest life they could give him. He needed one he could actually handle, and that left them with a harder question. If too little wasn't enough, and more wasn't automatically better, How were they supposed to know what was right for Otis? After that, Dottie and Lyle stopped deciding in advance what a good outing is supposed to look like. They choose quieter places. They stay for less time. Most importantly, they pay more attention to what Otis does once they get there. There is a worn blanket Otis already sleeps on around the house. One afternoon, Dottie tosses it into the back seat because they're visiting a friend, and she knows he'll want somewhere to lie down. He uses it on the porch that day, so the next time it goes with them again. Before long, Lyle starts leaving it in the car. Eventually, it goes to the beach. Otis steps out slowly and spends a few minutes smelling the air before making his way across a small stretch of sand. He doesn't go far. When he stops, Dottie doesn't coax him toward the water. They put his blanket down in the shade, set a bowl of water beside it, and let him decide what happens next. Otis lies down. For most of the afternoon, he sleeps while Dottie and Lyle sit nearby. A friend asks why they bother bringing him if he's just going to sleep anyway. He doesn't have to do anything, Lyle says. He's just part of our day. That distinction matters beyond Otis. It's easy to divide a dog's life into a few boxes: home, yard, walk. But being part of our lives can offer more than exercise. A dog might smell somewhere different, watch what's happening around them, explore for a few minutes, or simply rest nearby. That doesn't mean every dog should go everywhere. Some need quieter places, more distance, shorter outings, or days at home. Being included isn't the same as being pushed to participate. The point is giving the dog an opportunity, then paying attention to what they do with it. On the drive home, Otis is asleep in the back seat when Lyle looks over at Dottie. "Do you think he remembers any of this?" Dottie looks back at Otis. "I don't know. Maybe he won't remember the beach tomorrow. Neither of them can know. But that afternoon he smelled the air. He walked as far as he wanted, rested when he wanted, and spent the rest of the day near them. For now, that has to be enough. Over the next 11 months, the days never settle into one pattern. Some mornings, Otis wakes restless and doesn't seem interested in going anywhere. On those days, the blanket stays home. So do they. Other days are different. Otis may spend 10 minutes following one smell along the edge of the yard, or he may walk farther than anyone expected before stopping halfway down the driveway. When he stops, nobody tries to turn another few steps into a goal. They wait, see what he does next, and let that be enough for the day. Lyle starts keeping the blanket in the trunk without anyone asking. Water goes into the car almost automatically. Friends get used to Dottie and Lyle leaving early, changing plans, or deciding at the last minute that Otis is better off at home. One afternoon they stop for coffee outside. Otis walks from the car to the table, circles once on the blanket, and sleeps almost the entire time. Months earlier, Dottie might have wondered whether bringing him had been worth it. Now she doesn't. The harder days are still there. Some nights Otis paces for hours. Sometimes he walks into the same corner twice within a few minutes. There are mornings when he seems tired before the day has even started. Then an afternoon comes when the world seems a little easier for him again. A neighbor eventually asks Dottie how Otis is doing. She pauses before answering. Depends on the day, sometimes the hour. That becomes more useful than calling him better or worse. Otis isn't recovering, and Dottie and Lyle stop measuring his life as if recovery is the only result that counts. A good day might mean a short walk or 5 quiet minutes outside. It might mean eating normally, sleeping comfortably, or simply settling near them without spending the night wandering. The question Lyle asked after the beach never completely disappears. Over time, though, it matters less. Late one night, Otis wakes disoriented and tries to stand. He pauses halfway up, as if he isn't sure what comes next. Dottie sits on the floor a few feet away. She doesn't call him over. After a while, Otis moves toward her and settles beside her. A few minutes later, he lets some of his weight rest against her leg. Dottie doesn't know whether Otis remembers the first night she sat on that same floor, waiting for him to stop pacing. Tonight, he chose to stay. But Otis is still declining. The confused nights become more frequent, and some last longer. He tires after shorter distances. Eventually, there are days when even settling on the blanket takes more time than it used to. Dottie and Lyle have spent months learning how to make room for the life Otis still has. Now they have to face a harder question. When is making room no longer enough? They start talking with their veterinarian more often about what they're seeing, how well Otis is eating, whether he can settle, how much of the day still seems comfortable, and how often the difficult periods are beginning to outweigh the easier ones. There isn't one dramatic moment that answers the question. It becomes clearer slowly. Eventually, they make the decision they knew might come from the day they brought a 17-year-old dog home. With their veterinarian's help, Dottie and Lyle let Otis go at home. They don't try to turn his final day into something special. The worn blanket is underneath him, and Dottie and Lyle stay close. Months earlier, when Otis woke confused in a strange house, they had wondered whether bringing him home had actually made anything better. By the end, they have their answer. They never stopped the confusion or gave Otis his memory back. They simply learned when to walk with him, when to wait, when to take him home, and when all he needed was for someone to stay. Nobody could know how much Otis remembered: the quiet parks, the car rides, the afternoon he slept near the water, or the nights when someone sat beside him until he settled. By then, Dottie and Lyle had stopped needing to know. He didn't have to remember every good day for those days to have been worth giving him. If you enjoyed Otis's story, watch Tully's story next, a blind little dog who was misunderstood again and again. The video is on your screen now, and I think you'll love his story too.